Good afternoon and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicola Richardson, the owner of Pink Vintage Jewellery, and I just thought I would jump on quickly before the tutorial starts just to say this is my gemstone spinner ring. You will need some sterling silver sheet metal 0.8mm thick and 1.5mm sterling silver wire. I also use a pre-made bezel cup and gemstone of your choice. It's not exactly a video for beginners. You need to know how to solder and how to use a saw blade and cut metal. But if you can do that, you'll probably like this. It's a little bit more challenging, and I'd love to see what you make. Please leave the jewellery that you make in the comments. That would be lovely to see. And if you got any tips for me as well, I am a self-taught jeweller. I taught myself many years ago how to make spinner rings. So if you can give me any tips as well, I'm always looking for new techniques and ways to do things a little bit quicker to speed up any processes. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial. It is a little bit long, but it's been designed so you can sit at your bench and pause it and catch up and then play again. So we can essentially make the ring together. So I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you make. And don't forget to sign up for more tutorials like this in the future. Bye bye. Okay, welcome to my garage. So this is a bit of silver that I've just received this morning from Cookson's Gold. It is 0.8mm thick silver sheet metal, and look at the price, £21.59 for this 120mm, so 12 centimetres of silver. That is the current price of silver at the moment. It has gone absolutely insane. So what I like to do first of all is, can you see here there's a little beveled edge? We need to make that really flat, because that will be a really obvious line in the ring if we solder that as it is. So this is how it comes cut from Cookson's Gold. Everything's got a beveled edge basically. We need to flatten that side there before we do the measurement. So that's the first job I am going to do right now. I like to use a mitre vise for this job. I only discovered this about 18 months ago, and I wish I would have discovered it many years ago. It's just amazing. It makes your soldering so much more successful if you have got a straight edge to deal with straight away. So what we're going to do now is we're going to file that flat. And hopefully you can see it really flat, perfect line, which is going to give the best solder join. Okay, so what we need to do now, this has just come out of the mitre vise. We need to measure our ring, and I need this to be a size S, so it needs to be 62.7. So we'll just go roughly. There we go. And we can make this nice and square with a set square. There we go. Then we can cut that with our saw frame. Go. So this is our ring blank, hopefully the right size. So this is the ring blank here, cut to the correct size. What I like to do is add a little 925 stamp just to the inside. This is already annealed, so we don't have to anneal it before we start hammering, adding the texture. But sometimes when you're hammering about halfway through, it might get really tough, and you do notice that you might need to stop to anneal it. let's see how we get on. I always start in the middle. This is just a ball peen hammer. You can see it's taking the texture lovely. There we go, that looks really lovely. Very, very effective, and that's going to come out super, super, super shiny after polishing. There's a few little bits that I've missed, so I'm just going to go in. Oh, lovely, I'm really happy with how that looks. What I like to do now then is, before I make it into a ring, I like to anneal it, but I'm also going to measure to make sure we are at the same size all the way across. And this way here, I want to measure this width and in the middle, just to make sure, because it's easier to sort of file that out now and make it all flat if needed. So that's saying 8.3 at that end, 8.1, so it's a little bit narrower there. 8.3, 8.3, 8.1 there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little bit of filing here and here, just to try and make sure that it's exactly the same width from the beginning to the end, from the left to the right, sorry. And the reason being is, when we try to flare the ring at the end, we don't want it to be, we don't want to be going off on a tangent and having one area wider than the other. I've had that happen in the past and it doesn't look very good. So just spending a little bit of attention to detail now, making sure this is the same width all the way across, will make for a better flare later on. I'm just using 240 grit sandpaper and just sanding all the edges which were a little bit higher and wider, and then we'll measure it again with the digital calipers. So now I am just going to, if I try to put that on a ring mandrel now, it would be really, really, really hard and difficult to do. So what I like to do now is just anneal the metal. It just relaxes the metal, relaxes all the particles, so you can wrap it around the ring mandrel and it's much easier. So there you go. Let it get to a cherry red, and then we're just going to allow this to cool naturally and before we to make it into a ring. So this is a metal once it's been annealed. We're using a ring mandrel. I just like to press it all the way around. As you can see, it's really easy to handle because it's been annealed. And then when we get to the last little bit here, I like to use a rawhide mallet just to give that the curve that it needs. And then we just manipulate this into a ring shape. Now remember, we've hammered this, so the chances that these edges are completely straight have definitely disappeared with the hammering process. So what we need to do, just get them as close as possible, and then I like to pass the saw blade through it one final time just to make sure that edge is as flush as possible. Yeah, you can see that's not very flush at all. And it's a little bit wavy because of the hammering. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to get a saw blade and I'm just going to saw through that again. Sometimes you might have to do it more than once, but that just means you can see the line there. It's not, you can see some gaps. Use a saw blade, saw through it again, and it will make both sides incredibly flush. And then you're going to have the perfect solder join. You can still see a tiny little gap, so I'm just going to go through that one more time. Oh, that's looking a lot better. That's looking a lot better, and it looks incredibly flush, so I think we'll have a good solder join there. So the ring is now on my soldering station. I like to use liquid flux. This is one called Fire Scoff, and it's supposed to prevent fire scale from forming, because when you've got a hammered texture, trying to get fire scale out is very hard, so I try and avoid it if I can. I use hard solder for this. Now we've got a little pallion here, so make sure you put some flux on that as well. And I like to just place the solder join above the hard solder like that, so it's touching both ends. So I could see the flash. Just check it at the front. Yeah, that's gone through. We'll check it at the back. You can see that's gone through nicely as well. Beautiful. So I'm really happy with that. It's up to the top and it's at the bottom as well. So I'm just going to quench that in some water. And then we'll pop that in the pickle before we go on to the next stage. So this is the ring now out of the pickle. It's been there about 20 minutes while I had a nice cup of tea. And you can see it's lovely and shiny, white, got rid of all that yucky grey stuff. So now time to put it on the ring mandrel. And let's get it looking more like a ring shape. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to turn it around and do to the other. There we go. Still not perfectly round, but don't worry, I've got a perfect tool for that job. So this is my trusty ring stretcher and ring reducer. I got that many years ago from Cookson's Gold, and it's just amazing because you can use it actually to get the perfect roundness on your rings. It's very easy to use. Make sure the solder join's at the front and just give it a little push, and you can see it's really good at making rings very, 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 very round. So let's have a look on the ring mandrel. Now, can you remember what size we needed? We needed an S. An S is there. Perfect. Let's look at the other one. Lovely. So that's perfect size S. So we don't want to increase that size whatsoever. We're happy with that. Now on to the next stage. So what I like to do now is try and look at the solder joins. We're going to see, you can see they're quite visible at the moment. We need to make them blended in, and we need to remove that excess solder there. So just using 240 grit sandpaper, I'm going to work on this and try and blend in this solder join. I've got a little bit of leather which I like to use just to put the ring on. We're just going to slowly sand away that excess solder. I'm going to move on to 400 grit just for the rest of the ring, just so we can blend it in. And then what I like to do, sometimes you have to hammer over this part again because you might actually take away some of the texture. So what you need to do is, if you do remove some of the texture, add it back onto your ring mandrel and just hammer a few little pieces in there again, just to make it all completely seamless. And you shouldn't be able to see your solder join at all. It should be completely invisible. I'm going to do this on the outside and on the inside, so I'm not going to film it all because it'll be a little bit boring for you guys. So I've just been working on the outside, and I did have to texture. I sanded away a little flat spot where the solder join was, and then I've just had to put it back on and give it a little bit more of hammered texture there. So I'm happy with that, how that is looking. Now we need to work on the inside, and what I like to use for these are my trusty sandpaper rolls. This is I think I've got a 240 and a 600. So I'll start with the 240 and sorry, I'll start with a 240. There we go. It's a little bit coarser, and we'll work our way on the inside. We'll try and make that solder join completely invisible, and we'll get rid of all those marks on the inside as well. So I've just been working on the inside of the ring with the sandpaper sticks. I didn't film it because I thought it would be a little bit boring, but you can see it's looking a lot better now. The only thing with the sandpaper sticks is it does get very, very, very hot. So be careful that you don't burn yourself. You do have to take breaks every now and again. And if you can see the solder joints blended in, I can just see it still. Here it is, it's just here. So I've just got a little bit more work to do to make that completely invisible. And then what I like to do is we need to do some sandpapering on either side. So with 240 grit, I will sand that side and that side as well before we move on to making the chamfer. So just using 240 grit, I like to sand in figure of 8 motion, turning the ring as you go, just a quarter turn. And I like to go all the way from 240 all the way up to 1200 grit on both sides. This blends in the solder seam so you can't see it at all. And it takes you all the way up to the pre-polish stage. So I have sanded the ring here just flat and here all the way up to 1200 grit, and the solder join is completely invisible both sides, and here as well, completely invisible. So what we need to do now is this inner edge here is incredibly sharp and wouldn't be comfortable to wear. So we need to chamfer this edge here and here, just the inside edge of the ring. It also makes flaring it a little bit easier. And how I like to do it is using my sandpaper roll. Again, I start with my 240, and with this, just kind of go all the way around, and we get a nice chamfered edge, and we get rid of that sharp edge there. And I do that on both sides. So can you see that lovely shiny beveled edge? Might just go around and do it again with the 600 sandpaper roll. I've done one on both sides. So I've just gone round with the 600 sandpaper roll and just concentrated on that edge again, and I can feel a difference. It's so smooth, it's like butter. It feels lovely. So that's going to be really, really comfortable for your customer to wear. But it also makes, because we've thinned the metal here, it also makes flaring the spinner ring that much easier as well. So that's all I'm going to do with this ring, and now it's time to move on to making the spinner. So now it's time to make the spinner, and I'm using sterling silver wire. The diameter is 1.5, and you can see it's got a beveled edge here. But what I've discovered is my wrap and tap pliers are the perfect size. That big one there is almost identical to the size of my spinner ring. So I'm actually going to use these pliers to make the bigger ring. Now, this is just luck that this happens to be the same size. What you can do is actually, this wire is so soft, you can actually just push it around the bigger ring to make the ring like that. But this is a nice way of doing it. So as you can see, I've made a really lovely ring. And instead of filing that flat, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut through the saw blade. I'm just going to cut through like that. So both ends will be completely flush. So let's have a look at that. If you notice, there is a little gap. It's not exactly flush. So I'm just going to run through the saw blade again. So that is really, really flush, giving us two 90-degree angles. So we've got a really, really, really tight solder join. Okay, so we're back at the soldering station, and we are just gonna, we're just gonna add the flux to the metal. A bit too much there, and as you can see, it's a little tricky. There we go. I've got a very, very small piece of solder, not as much as I used last time, because obviously it's a smaller ring, and we don't want to be cleaning that up. I don't know whether it might be too small, but we will see. And again, place it directly over the solder. There we go. There you go. If you can see the flash, the solder's melted. See if it's gone through. We'll have a look. Looking good. We'll quench it and we'll add it to the pickle. Okay, so I've not had it in the pickle very long because I need to do more soldering, but I wanted to just check the size, and you can see it's a little bit too small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it on the ring stretcher and just make that a little bigger so it fits over the ring nicely. So it's just been on the ring stretcher. Now obviously if you don't have a ring stretcher, what you can do is pop it on a ring mandrel and using a rawhide mallet stretch it that way till it fits. And we want a nice little fit, just, can you see, and it's got a nice little turn to it. You don't want it too big, because then you have to be more severe with your flare. So we just want something like this, which gives us a nice twist, but is still quite snug. So now I'm going to solder this little bezel cup. See if you can see it. It's a nice serrated edge bezel cup. It's 4mm in diameter. And what I do is I'm going to sweat solder some solder onto the top of the bezel cup, and then we are going to solder the bezel cup onto the ring. So that is our next step. So we'll get our flux. Now this bezel cup is clean. I've just taken it out of the packet, so we don't have to do any other work. So I'm just going to coat it in the flux, and I'm going to use a very, very, very small piece of solder just to begin with. We might need some more solder later, but for now I'm going to try and find a tiny, tiny little piece what we can put on the top. There we go. So let's add a little bit more flux, but what's the chances of this going wrong and it slipping off? Very high. So now I am going to warm that, trying not to knock off the solder, and we're going to melt the solder onto the bezel cup. Start far away. You don't want to go in too quickly and blow off that solder. And then head in a little bit. That's it. So the solder's not flown off, which is great. And we're just going to melt that solder to the bezel cup. There we go. So you might have just seen that it melted. It melted, but it's still on the top of the cup, as you can see there. Perfect. So now it's time to get set up for soldering the bezel cup to this outer ring. Now, we have got some solder joined there to clean up, but I don't clean it up yet because we need to know where that is. When you're attaching anything to a ring, you always want to avoid this solder join. So I'm going to attach the bezel cup here to the top. So I want that to be obvious for now, and we'll clean it up at the end. But what we need to do first of all, we've got a round edge here and we've got a flat edge there. We need to make a little flat spot on the top of this ring, put it in the mite of ice and make a little flat spot again. So we've got more contact area, more surface area for the solder to adhere, for the bezel cup to adhere to this ring. So I've put the ring in the vise. I will just show you, that's where my solder join is. Nice and tight. And that is where I am going to file a flat spot. So we make it all really secure, pop it on there, and I've just got my zero cut file. Now this is quite thick, obviously. We've got the bezel cup, it's 4mm, so we don't want to do any wider than 4mm, otherwise you will see this. So we've got to take some care. Just be using a flat horizontal motion. We're going to file a flat spot on this ring. And if we just have a look now, I have just filed a very, very, very tiny flat spot. It's not a lot, but it doesn't have to be a lot. It just has to adhere and increase the surface area. And from a size point of view, we can check our bezel cup. We don't want it to be any bigger. So I think I'm happy with that. You can see the flat spot and it's just about the same size as the bezel cup. So they've just been in the pickle again. I just wanted to get all the oxides off and make sure everything's really, really, really clean. They've been in the pickle and they've just been in the ultrasonic to clean off the chemicals as well. So I'm not going to lie to you, this is a little bit tricky. There's a couple of ways we can do this. I got these tweezers last year and you can put the bezel cup there and the ring can sit into there. What I found with this, it's really, really difficult to get in alignment. I find it moves and it tends to be a little bit wonky one way or the other, which is not ideal. I have had some success with them, but I prefer to do it just with a third hand and eyeball it now, is what I like to do. So here we've got a third hand. I've got it on some kind of Tupperware dish and we are going to put the ring in the third hand and place it on top of the bezel. That is the plan. Obviously we need to avoid that solder join there. We want to put the bezel cup here on our flat spot. And what I like to do is, because you cannot see this flat spot when it is face down, I like to just put a little mark here and here, just so I can see when I'm putting that on there where that flat spot is. So it's really, really tricky getting this right, because you need to get the flat spot directly over the bezel cup, but you also need to make sure that the ring is vertical and in the middle there's the same amount of metal at the top as there is the bottom, so it is completely central. It does take a little while. It's going to take you a good few minutes for this setup to work. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cover everything in my liquid flux and I'm going to set it up. But I'm not going to film it because we could be here for minutes and minutes and minutes. It takes a long time just to get it perfect. So good luck to you. So I finally got set up. I've made sure we're vertical this way, we're in the middle this way, and we're on the flat spot as well. It's really tricky. It took me quite a while, a good few minutes to get this set up, but I'm happy with it now. So now we're going to solder this. It's really important when you're using a third hand, you've got to heat the tweezers as well as the ring. We don't want to focus on the bezel because that's the thinnest part really. We want to focus on the tweezer and on the ring. I've brought this little fire brick in as well. This creates like a little wall and the heat will come back onto the ring as well. So fingers crossed. So I just start heating the tweezers. You can see the flux turning white. Use a nice circular motion. We might need to put a little bit of pressure on the third hand. So there we can see the solder has flown. Let's check it. I'm not sure that's been a success. We might have some desoldering to do, but I'll have a look. So you can see it's not in the center. It must have moved and I didn't notice. So we are going to desolder that. And I'll show you how to do that when you've made a mistake. So to desolder something, we have to heat it up. And what we'll do, we'll gently push off the bezel cup with my solder pick, and then we'll have to pickle it again and set it up again. Go. So we managed to get the cup off. I'm going to put these in the pickle now and start again. Okay, so we've set up again. I put everything in the pickle. I run some more solder on the top of the bezel cup, and I actually filed the flat spot again on the ring because it was all mucky with the previous solder. So everything's clean, ready to go again. Let's try again, fingers crossed. So the solder has flown this time. Let's have another double check. Yeah, you can see the solder's flown lovely there. Oh yeah, it's in the centre. Has it flown at the back? Yes, it has. So that's great. So we'll get that in the pickle. Ready for polishing. So this is the ring out of the pickle. And you can see we've got the solder join here. So I'm just going to clean that up with some sandpaper sticks, and we've got a little bit of solder around the edges here. I'm going to clean that up as well before we move on to the polishing. So I am just going to use a 600 grit sandpaper stick. We're going to just try and blend that solder seam in there. And then once I've finished with the 600, I'm going to work my way all the way up to 1200, ready for polishing. And I've got a half round stick so you can get the inside of the ring, just like that. So this is the end result. We've got a nice blended in solder seam. Had a tidy up at the top as well. Got all the scratches out. It's looking really good. Got a nice spin to it. So now it's time for polishing. So I have to admit, I'm a very lazy polisher. This is my rock tumbler. It's actually a children's rock tumbler from the National Geographic. And I've just got some stainless steel shot in there, some dish soap and some water. And I pop the jewellery in there and we will tumble it for a good half an hour to an hour before we move on to setting the stones. So the rings are out of the tumbler, and as you can see, we've got an excellent shine and polish on there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set the little gemstone. Now the gemstone for this ring is a little pink opal. This is my birthstone spinner ring, so the customer can actually choose what gemstone they want. And here it is, the little opal here. There we go. And I get my gemstones from the Curious Gem and the bezel cups from there as well, because they actually make sure that the gem will fit inside the bezel cup for you, which, you know, is great. And as you can see, look at that. That's a perfect fit. Just a pink opal cabochon. And yeah, that's why I like to use the Curious Gem. Just takes the guesswork out of it. You don't have to measure your gemstones and send anything back. You know you're going to get a perfect fit every time. So now I'm just going to use my little bezel pusher, and we're just going to push the serrated decorative edge onto the gemstone, and we kind of do it in a north, south, east, west fashion. Well, should I say east-west fashion? First, holding the gemstone in place so we don't lose it to the garage floor monster. Oh, sorry, that's my phone going. Sorry about that, my daughter rang me halfway through, so I had to just answer that call. So yes, where were we? Let's get back to it. So we just gently, with the bezel pusher, work opposite ends. Until we get all the way around, until the gemstone is nicely set. I love this decorative edge because I think it looks really, really pretty. And it's so easy to set. The gemstones, when you use this decorative edge, are just a doddle to set. You don't hurt your hands as much as when you're using regular bezel strip. So I'm just going to go all the way around. And then once we've done this, we've probably made some scratches onto the outside of the silver. You can see it's taking shape now. So I'll just keep going till it's really, really, really set well. And then we'll remove the scratches with, I've got a couple of options. I can use a sandpaper roll, or I can use a stick, or I've got some little polishing wheels, which might be a bit more for the delicate nature of this. So we'll have a look at that. So that is the opal all set. I'm really happy with that. I don't do any more with the setting there. You don't need to. The decorative wire bezel, sorry, it pushes over really, really, really easily. And with opal being a soft gemstone, we don't want to do too much. We don't want to crack that stone. So now I'm going to use some little, I've got some little polishing wheels, and I'm just going to polish round the bezel to remove any scratches that I might just have put in. So now we're at the final stage, and we don't want to balls it up now because that would be a catastrophe, but I have done it, I will admit. Sometimes you can get a little bit too eager with this flaring business and you can actually split your solder seam, but we're going to try and prevent that from happening today. So we've got a doming punch. I've got a set of these in different sizes. I think they come in a set of 10. You want one which is bigger than the ring, and with a rawhide mallet, gently tap and then do a quarter turn. I don't like to do any more than that. I don't want this solder seam to split. And I just make my way around ever so gently on one side and then the next. And keep checking to make sure that nothing, you've got some consistency. And you're not making the ring bigger. So we've been doing that for a good while, a good few minutes. In fact, I actually upgraded to my stamping hammer. I probably should get a little bit more of a heavier hammer for this job, but it does work, but it just takes a little, it's time consuming. But I think if you had a heavier hammer, it would be a lot quicker. So what we're wanting is, we don't want the spinner to come off either side. I think if I gave this a good pull, I think I still could get it off. So I am just going to do a little bit more work on it. And then we are going to do a final polish. Because obviously we've put lots of sticky fingerprint marks on the piece. So I'm just going to do a final hand polish as well. So I've just been spending another few minutes working on either side. And you can hear a lovely tinkly sound. And the spinner's not coming off now. I'm really happy. I don't think the customer could get that off even if they wanted to, so I'm going to give it a polish. Unfortunately, it's really dark now, so I wanted to take some photographs of this to get it on my website, so we'll have to finish that tomorrow and get a nice video of what it looks like in the daylight.